Now, the next two, again, are very similar to each other. It's blocking and overshadowing. There's just going to be one small difference about when things happen. So let's start, let's start with blocking. Okay. In blocking, we've got our basic classical conditioning here. And we have a CS that's going to predict the US, and we have some trials, and we learn to respond to this. But after a few trials, after some learning's already occurred here, we go ahead and try and add a second conditioned stimulus. And the second conditioned stimulus is now both of these are available on every trial. But I don't learn anything to the second one. It's almost as if I already have a conditioned stimulus, I already have a predictor, so it doesn't really make sense to learn another predictor. Now, if we were, let's use an animal example. If we were going to do like the conditioned emotional response or conditioned suppression, the rat in the box where, let's say, a tone comes on and it predicts that he's going to get a foot shock. We watched a video of that. Let's say he does this a few times and now he's learned the tone means I'm about to get shocked. Well, now we run some trials where we play the tone and we turn on a light. So the light would be the CS2. And I give him a bunch of trials where it's the tone and the light come on for 10 seconds and then he gets a little shock. Well, now if I were to test for learning, we would see blocking if when we play the tone, which was the first CS, he responds. But if we turn on the light, which was the second CS that we tried to add later in the game, he doesn't have a response. It's like the learning to the first CS blocks the learning to the second CS that was introduced later. Now, overshadowing is very similar. The only thing is our two stimuli, our CSs, are both going to be available from the very first trial. So this would be, let's say we have the rat in the box, the tone and the light come on at the same time from trial 1. And then for 10 seconds, then he gets his foot shock. Now I do that a bunch of trials, and I'm going to go ahead and test for learning now. So I play the tone by itself to see if he's learned anything, and I play the light by itself to see if he's learned anything. If I find that, let's say, the tone elicits a response, he freezes, he doesn't press his lever, but the light, he doesn't respond to it, that's an example of overshadowing. Now both of these possible conditioned stimuli were available from the very first trial, but it's like one overshadowed the other. I only made an association between one in the US and not the other. That's overshadowing. Okay, at this point, this is when I would want you to try the handout that looks like this. Okay, I know it's kind of a little strange. Let me sort of explain a little bit. Now we're going to, work on this in class, but if you want to attempt some first, that'd be fine. What I have is I set up this little story here, and I told you what all the stimuli and the responses are. So the CS is going to be you see your friend. The US is he's really rude or mean to you. Now when he's rude or mean, you're going to have an automatic sort of negative response to that. You don't have to learn to not like it. Now eventually, after a few times of this happening, just seeing your friend is going to elicit this negative response. You've learned to just see the guy and be like, geez, what's up? Now I add a CS2 for the story. The CS2 is if the guy's dog, so let's say you see him walking his dog. So both him and the dog are there, available to be conditioned stimuli, but you may or may not make a connection. So if you just fill in these little blocks, like scribble in, CS1 it says, all right, see friend, US, he's mean. And then the next trial it happens again. Now we start adding the dog, see friend and dog, and he's mean. Okay. So you kind of fill in the story about what's happening on each day. And then it tells you if you just see your friend and no US, what happens, you have a response. But if you just see the dog, no response. And then the job is, so what does that pattern fit? Is that blocking, overshadowing, higher order conditioning, sensory preconditioning? Which one is it? And we're going to do that for each of these. We haven't yet talked about the answer to this question, so don't worry. But this is what we're going to do in class to really try and get a handle on this. If you want to try some now, just, pause the video for a little bit. Otherwise, come to class, we're going to do it. Okay, now I'm going to add 2 more ideas. So this one's pretty easy, called temporal conditioning. All this means is if you see classical conditioning and the CS is the time of day or time of year, then we call it temporal conditioning. We did an example on one of our worksheets about a holiday in December where you get gifts, and now you start to get excited when that comes around, and we talked about what are some cues for like that December is approaching. Well, you see the calendar, or, you have exams soon, or it gets colder. So there are things that tell us what time of year it is. There are things that tell us what time of day it is. If you were to start eating at a particular time of day, chances are in a week or two you would start getting hungry right at that time because your body becomes classically conditioned to the time of day and expecting, food or caffeine or something like that. So that's temporal conditioning, pretty easy. Just look for time as the CS. The other idea I want you to know is latent inhibition. This is when you have a stimulus that you've already learned things about, you've already, have some associations with it, and now that stimulus, you're attempting to pair it with a new US, and it doesn't work so well. It's kind of hard because you have this old learning. New learning is inhibited in trying to connect this old CS with this new US. This is a good example would be first impressions. So if you've never met somebody and they came in for a job interview and they came and they tripped and spilled their coffee all over your desk, and you would immediately make some associations. This guy's, clumsy, can't keep it together, right? It would be a bad impression. Now, because you didn't have any other association with this new person, you would learn that pretty easily, and it might be hard to overcome later. On the other hand, if there was an employee that you've known for years, they've always done a great job, really organized, coordinated people, and they came in for a meeting and they tripped and spilled their coffee, that probably wouldn't make such an impression on you. It probably wouldn't have this lasting association. So latent inhibition is when you do have these first impressions, and it's kind of hard to connect new ideas with an old CS. Okay, now with those two things, you should be equipped to do this handout. Again, we are going to work on this in class and look at it, but this is something you could try and do. Read these things. I would kind of skip A till later, just till the end, do the other things. There's a reason why I think that might kind of throw you for a loop. But really think about, okay, did the learning occur or not? Did I get a conditioned response or not to one of the two possible CSs? Well, just give it a shot. And do look at the Chapter 4 decision tree photo that I have on course materials, and that's the one that kind of asks, for those first four, higher order, sensory preconditioning, overshadowing, blocking, you can figure out by just answering questions which one it is, by deciding, was there a conditioned response to the second CS, yes or no? And then it asks about the timing of when the CS came into the whole game. So look at that decision tree to also help you figure these out. All right, we will see you in class.